Welcome into the episode of Patrick Jones Baseball. This week on the podcast, we have Steve Rodriguez. Steve is currently the special assistant to the head coach at Pepperdine University, the head coach being Tyler Latore. Tyler's a great guy. Hopefully we'll get him on the podcast after the season's over. But in this episode, Steve has a ton of experience as a college coach. He's been the head coach at a Power Four at Baylor. He was the head coach at Pepperdine. He's done some stuff within Major League Baseball. He was a player himself and played professionally and had a great college career. So he just brings a ton of experience, ton of wisdom. And so in this episode, we kind of bounce around a little bit. We talk some development. We talk about recruiting. A big part of it is just him giving advice on things to do and what not to do when it comes to the recruiting process. And just everything that he sees currently going on in the game. So I think you're going to enjoy this episode with Steve Rodriguez. Steve, thanks a lot for coming on today.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I appreciate it.
So I was doing some research on you, reading over your bio, and I came across this at the very bottom of your bio on the website. It said I had to reread it twice just to make sure I was reading it correctly. And it said in January 2010, Rodriguez won the Top Chef Award at the Baseball Coaches Cooking Challenge hosted by ESPN Zone in Anaheim, California. He successfully defended his title in 2011. My question is what was the dish? What did you win the award with?
So there were a couple different things. So it was fun because it was obviously ESPN Zone, Disneyland, and all the coaches from the Southland and in California were there, and they had some chefs and some people kind of being judges, and so it was awesome. It was a lot of fun. And so one of them, like, you had to make sliders, and so they kind of had some stuff that were pre-made, and so I made some sliders. That was like a blue cheese mushroom slider, and it was actually really good. And then there was some pasta stuff that we had to make, and I kind of got a little bit of a head start, mostly because when I was playing, the one thing I wanted to do every off season was teach myself how to do something. So one year I got like really into yoga because I had hamstring issues. So I got really into yoga and flexibility and mobility. And then one year I became a personal trainer because I wanted to just figure out like how I can get my body to work better. And then one year I got into cooking because I really wanted to just kind of really understand what I'm putting in my body and stuff like that. So I got into cooking. And so when this came up, I was like, well, this will be really interesting to see if I can actually put into effect what I've been like kind of trying to teach myself over the past few years. So it actually ended up working out great.
I love that. So do you still kind of do that where each year you try to focus on something to improve or learn or anything like that? Or like how has that evolved as you've gone into your coaching journey?
Well, that's what's funny about that is that's one thing I try to tell coaches to do quite a bit is to do something that they've never done or they're not good at. Because as a coach, it's really easy for you to show up every day and do what you normally do. And for a lot of coaches, it's October, this is what we do. It's November, this is what we do. Well, for a lot of kids, and especially probably half your team, they haven't done it yet. And so they need to remember what it's like to do something new and to not. And so that was a part for me that I learned was really helpful. Like when I came out to Texas from California, that was part of it. Like I didn't know how to hunt at all. And so I really kind of submitted myself to the fact that I was not good at it or I didn't know how to do it. And so I told our guys, I was like, hey, I want you to teach me how to do it. What kind of shotgun do I need to get? So what do we do? How do we do it? And I literally became the student in that moment. And from that day on, I've loved every minute of it. And so, but it was very humbling to kind of, take a step back and go, I don't know how to do this. But that just reminded me of how hard it is to be older and learning something new. As these kids get older, it gets harder to teach them things, especially when they're used to doing it a certain way.
That's great. I mean, I love that you mentioned that. And I think about that from an aspect of I sometimes look at other people and what they're doing, and not even in sports necessarily, but they're willing to become a beginner at something else, right? And look at, this is an extreme example, but like someone like Elon Musk, whereas like, he actually made his money originally in software, and then he was like, actually, I want to build a rocket company now. He knew nothing about rockets, but he was willing to become a beginner again to learn. And so that's an extreme example, but I think successful people are willing to become a beginner at whatever it is. So I think that's really cool that you did that and still do that. Obviously you have a ton of experience. I mean, I feel like this podcast could go a gazillion directions. So we'll have to have you back on again to do the things, talk about the things we don't get to today. But really wanted to pick your brain because you have so much experience as a head coach, and that's obviously rare. There's only so many head coaches. And so of all the players you've coached and just over the years as an assistant, even a head coach, what are some of the traits? And this doesn't obviously have to be solely playing. Like we all know what a good player looks like from a statistical standpoint, but if you dive even deeper, like what are some of the traits that show up consistently in the players who succeed at the college level, academically and athletically?
Um, that's a great question, and quite honestly, it's a pretty simple answer. It's the ones who refuse to not do well. And so my son he used to in high school, he's put like these motivational little post-its around his room every now and then. I read one that says "Don't suck today," and so that was like something that I think a lot of players, when they come out there, like they know they're not going to do well at certain days, and they know they're not going to perform at their best at all times, but they refuse to not do well. And if something isn't right, they're going to find a way to fix it. If they get really, they start to enjoy the boring stuff of baseball, the practice, the tee work, the drills. They start to really enjoy it, and they really push themselves to be really really good at those things. And when they're not good at it, those things, like you hear all these documentaries with Michael Jordan and Kobe and all these Derek Jeter, they do the little things so much that when they fail at it, it's almost more shocking than it is anything else. And that's what really good players that I've coached, that I've seen, they just refuse to. Um, they refuse to just to not do well. And when something doesn't go right, they're going to be in the cage, or they're going to be watching film to figure out what it was, and they get obsessed by it. They do.
How early do you know whether you have a kid who's a freshman and it's like, oh, this is one of those guys, versus it's like, oh, like this guy, he may not be the right fit based on what we're seeing in the program?
Right. Oh man. So I think the biggest one is like, how do they handle coaching?
Hmm.
you know I tell them right away, like, look, I'm going to say some things you're not going to like. I'm going to tell you you're doing things in a way that I want you to change, but it's not because I don't like you. And like, that's one thing that people kind of with coaching is really different, is you can be upset, but you're not upset at the young man who's doing it, or a young lady who's doing it. You're just upset at the mistake, and there's a big difference there. And I think some kids take it more personal, like he's mad at me. I go, no, I'm mad at the mistake. I'm mad that we didn't get that call. I'm mad that we didn't get that out. And that's where you start, certain kids really kind of develop when they start to get coached. Like the ones that are the most successful ones are the ones that, quite honestly, like I don't really have to get on. Like there's certain players I can literally in my head start going through, and certain ones pop up where I don't really have to like get on them about effort. I don't, like, that's the thing I will get on kids about the most, is effort. Like, you're going to make mistakes. There's an error column on the scoreboard for a reason, and it's because of that. It's because there are going to mistakes made. But when you know that you're doing everything you can, and I see it, I can't complain about it. And I remember one time I had a catcher named Chad Tracy, who's like I think he's the manager for AAA Red Sox right now. He's all over these Netflix episodes. And I remember I was all over him one day, and I go, Chad, what are you doing? And he goes, Coach, I messed up. We use different words, but he goes, messed up. And like at that point, I kind of go, okay, like I can't say anything. Like, he knows he messed up. He didn't push blame to anything else, and he owned every bit of it. And that's what made him a great player. He literally turned himself into a prospect because of that, because he was such a good athlete and refused to push blame to anything else. And he was a great leader on our team. Um, but the ones who want to get coached are the ones who you see right away, who, in my opinion, are the ones who they don't mind, like the phrase that always like kind of bothers me when I'm coaching is, well, for me, I think or I feel something, whatever it is, right? And I'm like, well, that's one of our problems. Is like I'm not worrying about what for you. I'm showing you how I want it done. And how you feel, what's for you. Like I don't care at that moment. And I know that's kind of harsh at times, but I'm trying to make them better. Like I'm trying to get over some hurdles that they're going to face. I'm trying to just I'm giving them the cheat sheet, the cheat codes, whatever it is, to get around it, to get to that end point where they need to be.
How are you able to identify that throughout the recruiting process? Because I'd imagine that's probably like the hardest thing to be able to identify when you're evaluating and then recruiting a player to come play for you.
Well, I think when I talk to kids, or when I used to talk to kids, that was kind of one of the things is like, hey, talk to me about your swing. What do you do here? Like literally kind of going through some of their mindset and their makeup and how they adjust to things and what they saw. Hey, go take me through your at bats. Like, what'd you see? What were you thinking? And just kind of going through that, just because I can see certain things, but I don't know what they feel and I don't know what they think. And it's so funny because, everybody says, how much of baseball is mental? Everybody's going to say the same thing. It's 90%, but they work about 5% on the part of their game, and so everybody says it, but nobody does it or knows how to do it. And so that's where I usually try to come in and I try to kind of, hey, look, that's not right. Like, I'm not saying you're doing it wrong, but we can do it better. Like, this will function, but there's better ways to do it. And I think as a coach, when you're looking at videos and you're talking to them, that's what really helps. And so in my process, when we were talking to kids, that was it. Is I wanted to kind of hear how they talked. I wanted to hear what they said, the words they used. Were they words that everybody's using on social media now? Are they the words that everybody calls them the gurus on social media? Is it this rotation? Is it this movement? They use like all sorts of body part language that I'm just like, no, man, your hands just aren't getting back. Or you're lunging, like whatever it is. But I just want to hear what they're saying and how they talk, because I need to know, I got to be able to communicate with this young man once he gets on campus, and I need to know how to do that.
What are some red flags when you were recruiting kids or on calls or visits or anything like that? Like, what are some things that players shouldn't do? Or and maybe this isn't widely known. Maybe this was just specific to you. But what were some of the things that kind of irked you when you heard or saw?
Parents.
Mm.
I'm just being honest. The kids were great, and the kids are the parents are usually the ones who. And I usually, when I do speaking engagements, I usually tell them parents are the one thing you can do in this process is screw it up, because I don't like when I'm trying to talk to a young man and parents say, "Well, we feel or we think." It said, "This isn't a we thing. This is Patrick Jones and Steve, like I need to know what he's thinking. I want to hear him speak. I want to hear what he does. And so when I ask questions, I want the young man to answer it. I don't want parents to answer it unless it's direct question involving the parents, which in that point is usually, about finances, academics, things that involve the well-being of the student athlete. But for the most part, the only thing that can really happen is, not be engaged in the conversation, not really have any questions. For I'm talking about the student athlete now. Um, really be curious about kind of what coaches do. Like, you're going to go play for a coach for the next 3 or 4 years. You need to know who they are. Ask questions about them. Like like my favorite conversations with kids are the ones who go, Coach, so how'd you get into coaching? Or, hey, what do you do in your spare time? Like questions that throw me completely off track, that allow me to kind of go, oh my gosh, this is actually a really enjoyable conversation. Because that's the part that I really like, is when kids are engaging in the conversation. It's not, your tell me about what does your fall look like. I mean, there's basic questions that every kid asks, and so you have those answers. But I like the ones who come up with different answers, that have kind of done their research, that know some things about me, that they can kind of pull some stuff aside. And, who is your toughest pitcher to face in the big leagues? Where was your favorite place to coach? I mean, things like that, that kind of make me have to think a little bit. Those are the ones that I really enjoy. Um, But the ones who really pretend like I know they're quiet, they might be introverted or something like that, but a baseball field and a baseball coach's office is the last place to be that.
Going back to the parents part, are you saying that were there ever times when you were going to offer a player, but because of the way the parents acted, you decided not to offer them?
Yes, multiple times.
Wow.
Because understand that I'm not just dealing with that young man for 3 to 4 years. I'm dealing with the whole family, and those are very difficult conversations. And I make that very well known when I speak in environments like this, that parents can really mess the process up. Like they need to hear what they want to hear. They need to get the information they want, but make it about your student athlete, because they're the ones who are going to have to live in it the next 3 or 4 years.
Wow, that's interesting. What do you like the most about coaching? I know you've been a head coach, you've done hitting, you've done kind of everything. What do you enjoy the most? I know when we talked, you said you really enjoyed kind of the early work and just getting out there and kind of before practice even started, working with the guys. Like, is that something you enjoy the most, or is it something different? Like, what do you enjoy the most about coaching?
There's a couple things, and the one you just talked about is the biggest one. Um, for me, it was just, I love being out there and I watching that aha moment. I love, being in the dirt with the guys, going, hey, like, we're going to do this until you get it right. As long as you want to be out here, I'm going to be out here with you. In the cages, like, hey, I can't feel this. Okay. And I tell guys right away, I go, sometimes Chad Tracy, I know I said him already, but he was a great example. My best coaching with him was just being quiet. Like, I would take him in a cage, and I knew that if he could hit a belt high to letter high fastball really well, that he was locked in. And when he wasn't hitting it well, then he wasn't locked in. And so I would literally just go in there and throw that pitch over and over and over again until, like I said, your body will make the adjustment. Just make sure you're doing what you want to do to get it. And he did, and that's why he was so good, is he knew that. And the only thing I could do was mess that up. So I could just tell him yes or no, but yeah, like, that was the part, is knowing where I fit in that model of development, in regards to how, like, kids get talked at a lot. They get talked at a lot, and so sometimes a really good thing for a coach is just not to say anything, let the kid figure it out.
Mm. And if you could go back to a younger version of Steve Rodriguez, Coach Rodriguez, what would be like a piece of advice or something that you've learned along the way that you think would be beneficial for him?
Oh, the use of video has been tremendous, and I'm going to go on all sorts of different
Yeah.
directions with this. Bear with me. Um, I had one of my former players. His dad came up to me one day and said, "You know what's amazing is when you have kids, when your kids grow up, you're going to coach differently." And I didn't understand it at the moment, and I didn't really think about it. And then as my kids got older and they became athletes and they started doing things, I understood what he said. Um, and knowing that if it was ever my kid, how did I want them to be talked to, motivated, and stuff like that? So that was kind of one thing. So remember how hard it is to play this game. I think coaches, the further away from playing you get, the easier the game becomes, and or in your head it does. Like, no, just do this, and it's not that easy. So remembering how hard this game is a really interesting part. And I always had a philosophy, like, you parent how you were parented and you coach how you were coached. Well, you can't do that in 2026. The things that I was coached on in 1980s and 1990s, you can't do that anymore. So you have to be really able to adapt. I was one of those coaches. I used to tell. I kind of laugh with kids now because I go, yeah, I was coaching before cell phones were actually a thing. And, they kind of look at me and I go, yeah, we didn't have Google. We actually had to, like, go figure stuff out. And so that was, one of the things, is that, like, technology has become a tremendous part of learning and development. And sometimes kids they don't feel certain things until they see it. And so being able to do that is a really big deal. And so being able to utilize technology, like, I used to be one of those old coaches. Oh, I hated cell phones. Cell phones are ruining the world. I said, okay, well, understand they're not going away. So how can we utilize them to your advantage? How can I take that cell phone and go, hey, send messages to kid, hey man, I know we didn't win today, but I really liked what you did, when you were on the bases and you read ball and dirt. That was a big time play by you. Or hey, I know you had a huge hit today and it didn't get recognized, but hey, I just so you know I did see it. All of that stuff matters. And taking video and sending it to them and comparing it to a big leaguer, hey, this is your swing, it's just a smaller version of it. And they watch it over and over again, or they read that message over and over again. And it's a different way to communicate with kids. And you have to be able to adapt like that. And I actually heard that about Alex Cora. I heard he knows his players remarkably well. He and Dave Roberts do the same thing. Like they know their players in and out. They know what school they went to when it's let's say it's random. Let's say Pepperdine, just because it doesn't have a football program. So let's say Pepperdine, and hey, I know your Pepperdine team's playing against Alabama this weekend on football, and hey, what do you think? So it starts that conversation, or hey, do you want to go sit at the bar and watch it or whatever? That's what they would say to him, and like it drops the manager, player, head coach, assistant coach mystique, and it just has two human beings talking to each other in a way that, hey, I'm trying to get you better and I'm willing to communicate however best is good for you.
Are those some of the guys that you would say you kind of look up to from a manager standpoint or head coach standpoint? Are there other guys that as well that you've really kind of, not going to say be inspired by, but learned from?
Well, what's funny is both of those guys were teammates of mine.
Okay.
So Joey was he and I were teammates, and then or Alex, sorry, Joey Cora was the player that I played with in Puerto Rico, but in Doc and Dave Roberts, everybody calls him Doc. But he and I were the Tigers together. So, but tremendous, first of all, tremendous guys, tremendous people. And I like as I hear that, I'm like I totally get it, because that's who they are as people, and it doesn't surprise me that they have that personality trait that wants to get the best out of those players, because both of them were pretty limited players. They were really fast. They could play defense. They could hit a little bit, but they got the best out of everything that they were capable of as players. And I think that sometimes that's the stuff that motivated them, is when managers saw the little things that they were able to do that help a team win. And next thing you know, they're able to take that, what they really enjoyed as a player, and move it into a managerial role and really feed those players the stuff that they really need.
I assume you watched that Netflix Red Sox series.
Yep.
What were your thoughts on that? Because like for me, I watched that, and obviously I loved all the behind the scenes stuff, and kind of you mentioned about Cora, and I was like, man, I'm a big fan of him. Just I didn't really know much about him before then, but just after that, it's like he gets the human element and has just really good. I know people say feel, but he really does have good feel. Was there anything that you took away from that, or just that maybe resonated with you outside of kind of what you just said?
No, I think everything I just said kind of goes into that. It really
Yeah.
does. The human aspect, they are humans, they have families, they have kids, they are human beings, even though they go out there and people yell and scream and say what they want to them. But like you got to have some pretty tough skin when you're going out there to do that. And what that does is like you get it from enough people. What's funny is there's a line in the movie F1, the one with Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
There's the female, kind of the one that does the tire exchange, and she's like beating herself up, and she's like, hey, don't beat yourself up anymore. There's enough people to do that for you. And that's kind of it. There's enough people out there that are going to beat you up. Like you got to have some grace for yourself, and the ability to want to make sure you're doing right. And as a manager, I think that's your job too, is you want to make sure your guys are in the right headspace.
Steve, like what's something, kind of going back to the recruiting process a little bit, what's something that players think is really important in the recruiting process that from like a head coach's standpoint, you've been a Power Four head coach, Division One head coach, like it's actually like overrated in your eyes?
Oh, I don't know if anything is really overrated. It's just the ranking of them. The things that might be overrated. Like I don't really care about, back in the day, there used to be spark testing. I don't know. And there's certain metrics that are useful. but if they're not used properly, I don't really think they're useful. I think they're a detriment to kids. And I heard this the other day, like some kids, like when they're like a pitcher, like, hey, my IVB is this, my horizontal is this, and I throw it, and it's a great pitch. Well, if it just gets railed into the gap, it's not a great pitch. It says it's, you're backing up third base, right? And so understanding that certain metrics are useful in regards to development, it doesn't make it the answer. If that's the easiest, if that's a way to say it. So like exit velocity is important because the higher your exit velocity, the better chance you are of getting a hit. But hits are important. It doesn't mean you're guaranteed to get a hit. Just because you hit a ball hard doesn't guarantee anything. Your job is to try to do everything you can to utilize those metrics to help you become a better player. Because once you get in between the white lines, it really is. It's about winning. And, in regards to the college game. And so I think that's one of the biggest parts is like, do all that, use that as development. But when you get between the white lines and you got a guy facing you or you're facing another guy, it's time to compete. Yeah, don't worry about all that stuff.
How do you go about managing your time as a head coach? Because I assume you're being pulled in a million different directions. You have your personal life too, which I think a lot of people don't. They overlook that. They don't from the outside because they're just worried about them. But so there's a lot of things you're juggling. Like what are some of the things that you learned over the years being a head coach on just managing time?
That might be the hardest things I think for a lot of coaches because you're getting pulled in a lot of different directions. And, we actually had this conversation the other day with my wife. It was funny. My son, when he was little, he had chest surgery. And so he was at Cedar Sinai for a week. And it was right around the week when you were allowed to start making recruiting calls, like July 1, I think it was back then. And so I remember going into like this bridge that went over one of the streets, and I was just literally in the walkway bridge, the catwalk thing, making recruiting calls as he was kind of recovering, in the room. And I'd go in there, he was still asleep. I'd go back out, make some calls, come back in. And it's really just trying to manage that. But I think the really good coaches start to know what's most important. And they start to really focus on those things. So there's a lot of things that will pull you away, whether it's from a university that you're at. And I can say that by, hey, we want you to be a part of this committee. Hey, can you come and do this? Is there any way you can volunteer your time to help with this? All of those are important things. But what's most important is your team and winning. And so making sure that your team is locked in. And so I think coaches really get better at managing that, whether it's I'm going to give myself 45 minutes for emails. I'm going to get my practice plan done the day before for the next day's practice, because what I don't want is the day to get away from me with things that pop up, because it's like you're putting out fires left and right. And you start to things get away from you, and all of a sudden practice there. But when you already have stuff like that set up, then it makes it really good. And I think when you can give yourself parameters, like, hey, I'm gonna give myself 45 minutes for this. Hey, this is my time to go work out. This is where I clear my head and get myself locked in for 45 minutes or whatever it is. The ones who kind of manage that really well are the ones who are probably the most stable in their life and their marriage and their families. Yeah.
How do you go about putting together, like when you put together your staff for the year or, for several years, if you had coaches who would stay for several years, like what are some of the things that you would look for? What you want? And because I think this is kind of interesting where there's certain coaches out there, like maybe they specialize in just pitching or hitting or like, would you always want a hybrid? Like, hey, even if you're a pitching guy or a hitting guy, like you still need to be able to recruit and scout and evaluate and then have connections and things like that too in the industry and not just be solely just pitching or just hitting. Like, how would you kind of go about organizing that or just figuring out who would be the right fit?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is you're looking for the ones that complement you.
Mm.
So I know there's certain aspects that I'm really good at: communication, talking, in regards to the team stuff and stuff like that. And there's certain things that to be honest, I just don't enjoy doing. And so I kind of use that as an excuse to not be good at it, I guess. It's like vacuuming, right? I'm just not really good at it. But that's the thing, is finding guys who are just really good at that, and then find the ones that complement you as a coach. I don't need them to. I don't want yes sir Like, I'm okay with disagreement. I'm okay with it, but don't disagree just to disagree. Have an answer that goes with it, or have a solution that goes with it. And, ultimately I get the trump card by being able to do that. Like, hey, I don't like that. We're still doing this, but I want to hear it. Like, I want to hear what your answer is, and I want to hear what better way there is to do it. And I want guys to be creative, because one of the weird things about being a coach is that once you become a head coach, you're supposed to have everything figured out. Like, hey, you're supposed to do this, you're supposed to do that, you're supposed to know how to handle, kids off campus, boyfriend girlfriend issues, parental issues. You're going to have this issue and that issue and coach issues, and so somehow in your contract it says you're supposed to know how to do all that stuff, and it becomes a lot. Like, pretty soon you're dealing with a lot of different things, and you start to lose sight that, wait a minute, like, what about my team? And so finding coaches that really compliment you. I had two rules as coaches for my assistants: don't cheat on the rules and don't cheat on your wife. And those, it was really simple. I said, because if you're cheating on your wife, you're not doing your job very well. You're worried about other things. And if you're cheating on the rules, you're not doing your job very well, and you don't know how to do it properly. And those were the two rules. Everything else on the baseball side we can figure out, but those two things would not be tolerated.
Wow, that's the first time I've heard that. I like this. I like how simple that is too. That's really good stuff.
Because honestly, I mean, everybody does like those after the season evaluations, and I kind of laughed at that. I go, we do everyday evaluations.
Yeah.
Like, every day there's something going on, whether you like it or you don't. Hey, I did not like when you did this. Hey, this was awesome. Great job with that. It's constant, right? But the key is, like, as coaches, as assistant coaches, and this was what I challenged Mike. Like, who do you talk to? How do you get better? Like, what are you doing to better yourself at your skill or your craft? That's great. You're great at, infield positioning and defense, but what else can you be better at? What can you be good at? Who are you talking to? Who are you listening to? Where do you go? And because there's so little time, right? You're coaching, then you're recruiting, and you have like the month of December for yourself, and that's really about it. So you have to find ways to better yourself. Find friends, find people, find pro guys, whatever it is. Hey, what, like, I used to do that all the time. Hey, what did you learn here? What did you do there? Hey, do you think I can talk to that guy? I would love to talk to him. And that's what's great. Baseball guys, just like you, hey, would you want to come on and talk? Absolutely. Baseball guys love talking baseball, and they will do it with anybody as long as the other person is willing to listen.
So that's something that you would look for, or in terms of just evaluating your coaches, and just like, hey, is he just satisfied, or is he continuing to want to get better and grow and learn and things like that?
Well, I wanted assistant coaches who ultimately had a goal to be a head coach at one point. You want them to want to do that. And quite honestly, some coaches maybe don't like it. They go, I don't want to deal with all that. I love being able to work with kids and not deal with, the rosters, the scholarships, the parents, administration. Some people don't want to deal with that, and that's okay. But I want coaches who are willing to look at things differently, because kids are different. There's not one kid that's the same. You have to be able to be well versed. You have to be a chameleon in sorts to be able to do the same thing, but say it in a different way, do it in a different way, so every kid can understand exactly what it is. Because if I'm trying to teach, Patrick Jones how to hit, and I want to get this thing across, and you're not getting it, and I keep saying it the same way, and you're not still not getting it, I'm frustrated and you're frustrated. So I need to be able to be a better coach, because I can't change how you learn, but I can really change how I communicate, how I show you something, how I verbalize it, or I just show you video. I can change my method of relaying that information to you. And that's my job as a coach. So I want coaches who are willing to think differently. Yeah.
When you said you do speaking events, you go speak to, what are some of the things that you talk about when you go and speak?
Quite honestly, I kind of talk about some basic things. Usually scholarship and development. That's usually the biggest things parents want to talk about. And so I talk about that. And honestly, when I go there, kids rarely have questions. It's usually the parents. So I know I'm talking to the kids, but I'm answering the parents' questions. So whatever question I get, I usually bring it down to the kids' level, whatever age they are, because that's what makes sense to them, and I want them to get it more than the parents do. Um, but it'll take, I kind of start at the beginning, just introducing myself, my history, and then I kind of I just say, hey, you can answer absolutely anything you want, or ask anything you want, and I will answer it But if I don't know the answer, I'll tell you I don't know the answer.
I guess is there something that you always say when it comes to scholarships or whatever advice you give that you feel is really valuable and benefit? I mean, I'm sure everything you're saying is valuable, but is there like one thing that's like, man, everybody should know this and maybe they don't or do?
Patrick, everything I say is valuable. Please understand. No, this is a very easy one for me. So before you even get into the scholarship aspect or the scholarship talk, I call it dinner table talk. Like you and your family and your child have to sit down and understand what exactly is your financial situation. What can you afford? What are you able to do? Um, because I have seen all realms. I have seen parents who come in and go, "We don't need scholarship." Great, that makes it easy. I've seen parents come in and go, well, we'll take out loans for the first year and then he'll earn scholarship. And I'm like, that's a bad route, because now you're putting pressure on the kid. You're kind of putting pressure on me. And I don't like that. So make sure that whatever you do, you have that financial conversation first, because if whatever scholarship, if there is one that's offered, uh, is available, right away, yes, we can afford it, or no, we can't, or you know what, that's close enough, we can maneuver some things. But what you don't want is the extreme to be the one that's available. And now you're trying to figure that out because, oh, this is something my son really wants. Well, finances are a big deal. And that's usually one of the largest issues with recruiting, is the financial aspect of it. So make sure that those questions are answered well before you get yourself into that situation where you're having to make a decision. Because if you make a bad decision, it can be financially costly.
If you have a player, and maybe this has happened or hasn't happened, but do you have a player who reaches out to you and says, "Hey, I don't need any scholarship money. Like, we're good," or the family's kind of saying that. Does that increase the chances that you will take that player because they don't need a scholarship?
Depending on the situation, like if you're at a school that doesn't have full scholar, like nowadays you can have up to 34 full scholarships, but if you don't have that, you still need people to pay for their academic schooling. So the part that we always say is, like, if you don't need it, that makes my job easier in regards to that. But it does help the team for sure. That is one of the things that I've had tremendous players come in and just say, we don't need scholarship. And I end up putting them on scholarship later on just because they've earned it. But the parents sometimes have said, no, give it to somebody who actually needs it or something like that. And it makes the job easier, because you do have roster spots to fill. You got to make sure that if that player is worthy of a spot, then it does make your job easier as a coach.
What are the biggest mistakes you see? And this could be a whole podcast in and of itself. On the transfer portal, players utilizing the transfer portal when they do it right versus wrong, and then from a coach's perspective too.
Mm. So the transfer portal. I mean, shoot, I think last year there was like close to 10,000 kids in the portal, um, and there's not that many spots. The biggest thing I tell kids is, and when I was a head coach, I actually, when the transfer portal thing started popping up, I actually believed that there should have been a caveat or a question where the coach, that the student athlete is leaving. So let's say Patrick Jones is at uh, Round Rock University here in Texas, and and you're behind an All-American. I can't guarantee you playing time. Love you as a kid, and I think you're a great teammate. But I want to be honest with you. Hey, if you want to go play someplace, I get it. And you're like, yeah, I'd like to try that. And I go ahead and sign off on it. Like, yes, I want this kid to go play. I think those are, and I believe it or not, I want to say there's about 95% of coaches that are like that. They would be like, yes, I completely get it. I am all about you going to get your playing time. I don't want to hinder you from getting to the big leagues because you got somebody in front of you. So absolutely. Or you're financially, your family's struggling, you don't like it, whatever the reason is. Most coaches are pretty amiable to those conversations. Um, and so I always wanted a coach to have a little check mark on there that says, yes, I completely am okay with this. But that didn't happen. And so now you jump in there. And the biggest thing I have for players that want to jump in the portal is this: just remember this very one simple line: no matter where you go, there you are. So just because the uniform is different doesn't mean it's going to be better. And I had a young man who I knew was getting he was on a pretty prestigious summer league team. I'm going to try to keep this as vague as possible. And other teams were like, hey, you know what? If you jump in the portal, you're going to get this. If you jump in the portal, you're going to get that. And somebody told him, like, look, if you jump in the portal, we can't guarantee you anything. But at the current school you're at, I know that your coach loves you, the school loves you, you're playing. He's like, you can leave, but I can't guarantee you're going to get that when you go to the other place. And he ended up staying, and he ended up being a first round pick, and he got what he was wanting. So that's the stuff I think that is really important, is like, understand why you're doing it, is you're getting in, not just because, and if it's about NIL, then that's a whole separate conversation. But it's about playing time, and you have conversations with your coaches, and sometimes coaches will be like, yeah, let me help you. I completely agree. I want to help you. I know some people over here. Let me make a call for you. Some coaches are really respectable about stuff like that, as long as it's handled the proper way.
Speaking of NIL, if you're all right speaking on that, my own thoughts and what I've always said about NIL, and this is just my own, obviously, it's my own opinion, is I see too many players changing schools for not much money, and it doesn't make they're not playing the long game, because they might leave to go to one other school for $20,000 or $30,000 extra or whatever it is. And I'm not saying that that's not a lot of money. Of course it is, but when you take into consideration that, and I love that line you put about, there you are, no matter where you're at, you're in a completely different environment now. You have to kind of, in a sense, prove yourself again, your worth, and you don't know what's going to happen. There's so many unknowns. Versus if you stay, if in the ultimate goal is to play in the big leagues, then you have that opportunity where you're actually playing to get drafted, versus going somewhere for just small dollars. If you end up in the big leagues, it'll be nothing. That's my thought on it. I mean, am I educating, you think, people the right way when I say this in baseball, there's not that much. This isn't football where it's millions of dollars.
No, you're right. And I think the biggest thing is playing. Regardless of the NIL amount, if you're not playing, like, aren't you in this game because you enjoy the game and playing it? And that's the part for me where, like, I don't care if you're going from a Power Four school to a Division Two, Division Three, NAI, mid-major, whatever it is. It's about playing. You need to play, and that is the biggest thing. And that's what I want people to know, is that when you jump in that portal, you're kind of left out there, and you don't know what's going to happen. And just understanding that is a really big deal. But you need to go where you're going to play. Like the finances, if you're going someplace because of finances, that's kind of a different, once again, a different topic. But for me, it's about playing.
When there's high school kids out there who a lot of them I've talked to, and they are obsessed with Division One. I mean, it seems like I could just name a random place in North Dakota somewhere, and it's like, oh, if it's Division One, like, I want to go there, no matter, even though there are better opportunities at the D2, D3. What would you say to those players and those kids, knowing what you know about the landscape of college baseball, and playing professional baseball, and all these different things and experiences that you have had? What advice would you give those kids?
I heard a great line the other day, and it was talking about something very similar to that in regards to how things rank. So if you just kind of put it in minor league context, AA to AAA stuff, there's like, hey, just view Division Two, Division Three, NAI is like, you're in A ball. And then you're hoping to get into, like, and once again, like, you can graduate up to that with, the transfer portal the way it is and stuff like that. Like, just because you start someplace doesn't mean you're going to finish there. You can go high to low, you can go low to high. It doesn't really matter. But I remember at one of the schools I was at, we were facing a kid from, I'll be honest, it's a very a low level Division One school, and I'm like, is this even Division One? They just won or something. And he just transferred into this school, and he absolutely carved us up. He dealt. And I was just like, okay, well, apparently we need to change our recruiting a little bit in regards to the transfer portal look, because some of these kids at these D2, D3 levels are remarkably talented, and you just don't, but now with video, with Synergy, Intermedia, and all these different video aspects, you can actually get a really good feel for what they're capable of doing and how they do it, and the research and the studies that all these teams are doing now on these kids, and you start to see kids that are popping up coming out of those, because kids take a little bit, like some kids take longer to mature, they take longer to grow, and able to happen at those D2 and D3 levels, and the next thing you know, you turn yourself into a dude and become a power four starting shortstop just because you were able to go a different route. Once there's always those sayings. The road to the big leagues is always under construction. Yeah, that's part of it, right? The construction doesn't always mean it's going to be linear. It's just not. It can be in different aspects, in different ways. It could be JC, then to an NAIA, then maybe to a mid major. I mean, who knows what it is? But the key is you need to play. That's the biggest thing.
What are your thoughts on some of the recent, I guess these are potential changes in the portal and eligibility, the 5 years, one-time transfer? I mean, if you had a magic wand, what would Coach Rodriguez want?
I actually, now this is just me, but I'm all for the one-time transfer. I think you get 5 years to play four, and that's the way it was in the past. And then everybody started complaining, well, my son didn't get his last year because he was hurt. In my opinion, is life happens. It's going to happen like that. And it's not the fact that, well, I want my son to fulfill his dreams. Yeah, that's great. Everybody, like you and 15,000 other kids, like that's the problem. And so you have to have some guardrails in there. I think you should be able to transfer once. I think you may have gotten yourself into a situation like you chose a school for the wrong reason, and you're like, yeah, this is not for me. I'm not playing. I don't like it here. I think you should be able to transfer out. I do. And then I actually think, I don't think this is part of it, but I think if your head coach leaves, I think there should be another opportunity for you to leave as well. Is there a caveat in that? Are you able to follow him, not follow him? Who knows? But I think those are things that are good. I think it's great for kids to have to kind of sit in their own mess, I guess is the best way to put it. Like, it's okay to not do well right away. And then it's okay to work yourself out of it. Like, just because you leave doesn't mean that mess isn't going to be there anymore. So like, finding a way to just get better and helping a team win is remarkably valuable instead of running from something you may not like.
And do you think those changes are actually going to go into effect?
That's a great question. I don't know. I think there's going to be some change. I don't know what it's going to look like. It's just a matter of how powerful the other sides are going to be in regards to pushing for certain things. I don't know what it's going to look like. And when I kind of talk to kids, about recruiting and stuff like that, I just tell them, I said, look, you need to take care of the small things you have control over, because the recruiting landscape is going to change probably 4 more times by the time you get there. So don't worry about it. Well, what about this? Well, I just heard this, and the JCs are now going to get more years. And I don't know. I don't know what it's going to look like. I can't tell you what it's going to look like. So just focus on playing baseball, learning the game, getting faster and stronger. And then that way, when it is your time, you're prepared for it.
All right, Steve, we're wrapping it up at the end. I know you got another call you got to get on, but I want just do a couple of rapid fire questions if you're good for it.
Absolutely. Let's go.
Okay, so what's the most overrated focus in recruiting? It could be anything.
The most overrated focus in recruiting. From which standpoint? From mine as
players.
Oh, gear. They yeah. Everybody has gear, so it's not that big deal. Bats, balls or ball. It's the same. Then don't worry about that stuff is menial.
Biggest red flag when you watch a recruit play?
Body language.
Mm.
Yeah, like is he a great teammate? How does he handle when an umpire makes a bad call? Either he's a pitcher or a hitter. Yeah, body language. Like how do they handle that, and how is it? How does it affect them the rest of the day?
What's one thing that players should be focusing on from a development standpoint in high school that most of the time they're not?
Hip mobility and speed.
Hip mobility.
Yeah, kids are sitting way too much. They sit all the time, and it's not nothing against them. They're just sitting. whether it's on a bus, on a plane, in a car, there's at school, in a dugout, whatever it is, they sit a lot. And so hip mobility, like their lower back, their hips, all of that has a direct reflection on speed, on their swing, on their uh, on throwing. I mean, all of it. Anytime you can gain mobility in your hips and lower back, I think it is a huge benefit. And I think that's one area that people are starting to focus on, which is great. And then I think the second one would be nutrition. Like, if you can get your nutrition dialed in, it'll be a game changer for you in regards to your physical development, your body, your recovery. It'll be game changing.
This is you might not want to answer this one. Your most favorite teammate you've ever had?
Favorite teammate that I've ever had. Wow, what's funny is I still stay in communication with so many of them, so that would be kind of harsh. Um, I'm gonna have to pass on that because I honestly I stay in communication like with just this past weekend I saw several of them, and then I talked to several, like almost one a day for former teammates. So I'm always talking to them.
Well, that'll be off the air. You can answer that off the air. Favorite coach you played for?
Oh, Andy Lopez. Andy Lopez was at Pepperdine, and then because mechanics were irrelevant. He was just trying to make you tougher, and that was, once again, that's part of it. Being tough on the field, like being tougher than the other player, is a big deal. Um, and then Glenn Ezel was a manager when I was in AAA with the Tigers. I just absolutely loved him because he was all about baseball. He wanted to talk baseball, work baseball, and he's just a great man. So I really enjoyed him as well.
Awesome, Steve. Thanks so much for coming on, man. It's been a ton of fun. I'm glad we got to connect. I know we just randomly met when I was out at Pepperdine, which I think Tyler's doing a great job out there. And hopefully after the season, we'll be able to get him on the podcast. I didn't want to bug him because he's got a million things going on. But thanks again for coming on.
Oh, I appreciate it, Patrick. Anytime. And like I said, like there's a lot of information out there that I would love to be able to share. So whenever you need me on about, regardless of whatever it is, I'll love to jump on with you.
I appreciate it.